Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I have another video for you in my Darker Side of History with a Twist series. It is going to be about the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum and also some history on how the world had viewed mental illness, which this is kind of a deep subject for me because I have a mental illness myself. I have bipolar and I'm manic depressive, and I do have to take medication for that. So I'm going to be talking a lot about mental illnesses and things like that. I do need to give a warning that the things we do talk about on the Darker Side of History, which is going to be about ghosts and paranormal, murder, killing, suicide, mental illness, just some of the horrific, darker things that have happened in our past, in our history, that you don't usually learn about in school because it is too much to handle. So, for today, we're talking about the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and I'm going to go ahead and start my recording for the history. This is part 1. We'll do history today. I'll do a quick makeup look. It's going to be very dark. A very dark makeup look. I'm feeling dark today, so we're going to do a dark makeup look today. And I will stop the video occasionally, or stop the recording occasionally to discuss what I've talked about in the recording. And I will give my final thoughts on that. And then part 2 will be out next week. I'm going to do my best to get these uploaded every Thursday, so please watch. Now, I've already done all my base, my foundation, my concealer. All of that is finished because I'm also trying to speed up my makeup as well, since I can't talk and do makeup at the same time. Apparently I can't multitask in that sense, but I'm going to keep trying. Anyway, let's go ahead and start the recording, and I hope you all enjoy. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, or also known as the Weston State Hospital, located in Weston, West Virginia. It was long regarded as one of the most haunted places in the country. The hospital operated from 1864 to 1994, 130 years before it closed its doors down for good. Now, to understand where the makings of buildings such as this came from and how the world at the time viewed mental illness, when the colonies began in America, they had certain views on the world and how people should act, extreme religious views, and so forth. So when a person was acting in a strange way or exhibiting odd behaviors, they were considered to be possessed by demons, the devil himself, or accused of as witches. Hence is where the 1692 Salem witch trials came from. Back then, we didn't have the understanding of mental illness like we do today. So anything unusual or out of the ordinary was considered devil-related. Now, in most recent studies by our modern psychologists, going over the historical documents from the Salem witch trials, describing the accused symptoms and behaviors, they surmised that most of the executed were more than likely suffering from one type of mental illness or another, or just insane. Now, throughout the next century, the treatment for someone that was allegedly insane was cruel and barbaric. The people suffering from a mental illness who didn't have anyone to take responsibility for them were mostly placed in prisons with common criminals, often chained to a wall, unclothed no matter the season, and covered in their own filth and excrement. Even if the people had someone to take care of them, it wasn't any better. The families would hide them away in attics or secret sheds and even holes in the ground to avoid embarrassment instead of trying to actually help them. facilities for these people weren't being built until the 1770s. But then again, they weren't designed to actually help the inflicted, but for people to just go and stash the allegedly insane away from society, because at the time, insanity was believed to be incurable. Thankfully, by the 1800s, change for these poor souls was beginning through the efforts of enlightened individuals like Dorothea Dix and then Thomas Kirkbride, which is where the Kirkbride Psychiatric Hospital System came from, and hence what the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built on. It was a part of the Kirkbride Psychiatric Hospital System, which meant it was a system of mental asylum designed, advocated by Philadelphia psychiatrist Thomas Story Kirkbride. Many hospitals across the country was built around this system, including Trans-Allegheny. His theories were contingent on regarding the healing of the mentally ill, in which environment and exposure to natural light and air were crucial to the healing process. The buildings were commonly built in the batwing-style housing with an average of 8 wings that sprawled outward from the center building. This design was to promote comfort and privacy for each patient. The buildings tended to be very large and situated on over 100 acres or more. Every patient was supposed to have their own private room, and each wing to be furnished comfortably with a parlor, bathroom, clothes room, and in an infirmary in each wing. They often had a speaking tube and a dumbwaiter to allow open communication and easier movement between floors. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was designed in the Gothic Revival and Tudor Revival styles by Baltimore architect Richard Snowden Andrews. The building of the hospital was authorized by the Virginia General Assembly in the early 1850s. Construction began in late 1858. Work was initially conducted by prison laborers. Later, skilled stonemasons were brought in from Germany and Ireland. Construction was quickly interrupted by the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. Now, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum has their own website. And I'm going to go ahead and use a direct quote from their website describing how influential this building was in the Civil War, even though it wasn't completed. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was a huge military base during the Civil War, and I don't want to get caught up in copyright or anything, so this is a direct quote from the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum website. It quotes, "The Civil War was the most tumultuous event in American history. It not only divided the country, but splintered families and friendships into bitter adversaries. Nowhere was this tragic factionalism more evident than in border states like Virginia. The emerging Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, the town of Weston and surrounding Lewis County, then still part of Virginia, was no exception. The events that took place here, although generally unknown, played a key role in remodeling the United States and have had lasting effects that are felt to this day. When hostilities broke out in April of 1861 with the bombardment of Fort Sumter, the Civil War, which would eventually extinguish over 600,000 American lives, had begun. At that time, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was still in the early stages of construction. The southernmost wing had been completed, and a basement and a foundation for the massive central structure had been excavated and walled in. In June, Virginia's secession from the Union brought all non-war related work to a halt. This set the scene for the most dramatic event in the history of Weston. At 5 a.m. on the morning of June 30th, 1861, the citizens of Weston were roused from sleep by the sound of drums, fifes, and marching soldiers entering their town. It was the 7th Ohio Infantry, which had marched all night from Clarksburg, approximately 25 miles to the north. In command was Colonel Erastus Bernard Tyler, who was familiar with the area and well known to many of its citizens. He had been a furrier before the war and had bought and sold his fur products throughout Lewis County prior to joining the Army. Tyler ordered his troops to sweep through the town, seize any individual suspected of Confederate sympathies. One of his men, Captain List, took 2 armed soldiers and made a beeline for a specific location and the real purpose of the mission. The location was the Weston branch of the Exchange Bank of Virginia, which held almost $30,000 in gold deposited by the state government of Virginia to provide wages for those laboring on the new asylum. Tyler's mission was to seize gold before it could be returned to Richmond and used to support the rebellion. Awakened by the commotion, banker Robert McClandish, who lived on the 2nd floor of the bank, appeared at the front door where it was demanded he turn over the contents of the vault. McClandish objected, but there was little he could do other than what he was told. List ordered the vault open and removed $27,000 worth, well over $500,000 today in gold coins, leaving $2,371.23, which the books established as due to creditors. The money was taken to Wheeling, where it would help fund the new state Virginia, which in 1863 became West Virginia. The partially built asylum and surrounding grounds became Camp Tyler, establishing Weston as an important military post, vital to the control of the well-traveled roads in the area. Completed southern wing of the asylum provided barracks, and the main foundation served as a stable. Control of the area would change hands several times during the war. Confederate raids in 1862 and 1863 temporarily dislodged the Union troops, and in 1864, raiders not only confiscated another $5,287.85 from the poor Mr. McClandish, but would strip the asylum of all food and clothing intended for its first group of patients. At the end of the war, the completion of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was prioritized. Consequently, while so many towns were financially ruined by the war and would remain destitute for a decade, Weston did not experience a post-war depression. Business boomed as the asylum established itself as the primary economic resource for the town. It would remain so until it was closed 130 years later. End quote from the website. Now, the first patients were admitted in October 1864, but construction was nowhere completed until 1881. And actually, buildings were constantly being built throughout the life of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum because the influx of patients were so high. The faster they would get a building done, the faster they would fill up with patients. The 200-foot central clock tower didn't get done until 1871. Then in 1873, segregated rooms were built. The hospital was intended to be totally self-sufficient, which included a farm, a dairy, waterworks, and a cemetery. The patients often worked the farmland for exercise or therapy. The grounds ended up being over 600 acres in total. In 1902, a gas well was drilled, and the name was changed back to the Weston State Hospital. Now, the hospital was originally designed to house only 250 patients in solitude, but by 1880, it held over 700. Again, 1938, almost 1,700 patients resided here, and by 1949, well over that number at 1,800 patients. At its peak in the 1950s, it held a whopping 2,600 patients in very overcrowded conditions. A committee organized by a group of North American medical organizations found that the hospital held anyone with epilepsy, alcoholic drug addicts, and basically anyone society didn't deem fit for the outside world. In 1949, the Charleston Gazette released a series of reports where they found the facility with poor sanitation, insufficient furniture, lighting, and heating in much of the complex. There was at least one wing that had been rebuilt after a patient started a fire in 1935 that they considered comparatively luxurious. Come the 1950s, the hospital found itself to be the home for the West Virginia Lobotomy Project. It was an effort by the state and Walter Freeman to use lobotomy in order to reduce the number of patients in the asylums that were severely overcrowded. And this was happening across the country, not just at Trans-Allegheny. By the 1980s, the hospital had a reduced population due to the changes being made in the treatment of medical illness. Even though it still had a long way to go, the patients that couldn't be controlled were locked in cages or strapped to beds. In February of 1986, Governor Arch Moore announced that he had plans to build a whole new psychiatric facility somewhere else and convert this one into a prison. The William R. Sharper Jr. Hospital was built in Weston, and the prison never actually came into fruition. The Weston State Hospital just simply closed its doors in May of 1994. Now, the hospital sat vacant for several years, and then in 2000, the Weston Hospital Revitalization Committee was formed to help aid in the preservation of the building and finding appropriate tenants to occupy it. Eventually, the property was auctioned off to Joe Jordan in 2007 for $1.5 million and changed the name from Weston State Hospital back to Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum when it opened for tours. He is now in the process of restoring the building. As of now, his daughter Rebecca Gleason is currently the operations manager. As of now, the first floor in the building, also known as the Kirkbride, holds a museum which includes art done by the patients who participated in the art therapy program. Another room is dedicated to the different medical treatments and restraints used throughout the history of the hospital. It includes a straitjacket and hydrotherapy tub. The hospital does offer a wide range of tours, starting with history tours all the way to overnight paranormal tours. The tour guides dress in 1950s nurses attire while giving the tours. That is the basic history of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Now we're going to get into what life was like. Okay, let's stop the video. Alright, that is the full history on the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Now, I also, while I was doing the research, had read that over the years, even after the main parts of the building had been completed, they would consistently add buildings after building after building. They had a geriatric ward. They also had a women's ward. They had so many buildings, it wasn't even funny. They had a morgue that they kept separate from the rest of the people, the rest of the patients, so that way they didn't see when somebody had passed away. They couldn't see it. They used a tunnel to transport the bodies, so that way nobody's seeing what all was happening. So my makeup look is almost done. Let me clean up a little bit, and I'll put some mascara on. Let me just complete this, and then we'll do the conclusion of the history of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Just a minute. Alright, well, as you see, I did all of the eye makeup, the eyeliner, the mascara, all of that is done. I don't really like it. I really don't like it. It feels very heavy, feels very cakey. I almost want to start over because it just does not feel that great. It kind of reminds me of the Sarah Paulson character on American Horror Story Hotel, where she's always crying. That's kind of what this gives me vibes of. I don't think I like it. I don't think I like it. I still have to do the blush and the and lipstick, but I don't even know if I want to bother because I'm still not that fond of this look. My eyes look super green. I will give it that much. But anyway, okay, back to what we were talking about. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Been around for 130 years. One of the only hospitals, there's only like 39 hospitals built in the Kirkbride system that are still around. A lot of them had been demolished, or they just got rid of them. It's a very dark part of our history. Not something to be proud of. And they started out with a good idea, and because of the state of the world and all the stigmatization around what they thought mental health was at the time, it was just overcrowded, and there was too much. I will go into the life at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in my next video. We'll talk about the different medical treatments that they used on who they considered to have a mental illness or were insane. We'll go into all of that. We will talk about the conditions behind the walls. All the research that I did, I was really, really hoping I could get a hold of the West Virginia Gazette, their studies on what it was really like inside the hospital. Now, I can come up with a lot of pictures. There are so many pictures out there just showing you what it was like and the different things that they did to these poor people that were there. There were children there. People would just go and drop their children off for one reason or another. The hospital at one point offered money to people to just admit somebody. It's a very sore spot, very sore subject in our American history. Kind of like the prison system wasn't all that great either. It was just very barbaric and it just wasn't great. So anyway, let me do my lipstick real quick, and I'll say my goodbye comments, and then this video will be over. Alright, this is the complete look. The dark makeup, the dark lipstick. I kind of feel goth right now. This red actually doesn't look that bad. It looked a lot worse until I put some gloss over it because it wasn't the greatest. But anyway, this is the conclusion to the history part of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Next week will be the life inside the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please, if you did, hit like, subscribe to my channel, leave me comments, give me ideas for future videos or anything you want to talk about. I read everything. Just let me know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.